Welcome to Oracle's Trending Topics discussion. Today, we're exploring the latest trends and best practices around the incredibly important topic of cloud and mobile security. I'm Doug Smith, Senior Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at Oracle. We're fortunate to have a rich set of ecosystem partners on the leading edge of innovation, who are not only industry leaders tackling today's challenges, but have important perspectives on what we should expect in the future and how best to prepare, manage risks, and take advantage of the opportunities. Joining me today are Jaime Fox from Deloitte, JT Keating from Zimperium, and my Oracle colleague, Johnnie Konstantas. Welcome, Jaime, JT, and Johnnie. Thank you very much for joining. To start, can I ask you, tell us a bit about yourself and your current role?
So I'm Jaime Fox, and I'm a partner in our cyber practice at Deloitte. I've been at Deloitte for about 20 years now, really focused in the tech sector. And predominantly, I help our clients really from a cyber M&A perspective. So as they acquire other organizations, they often look to us to help them with their cyber due diligence. I also have the luxury of wearing yet another hat. I am also our Oracle security leader and helping, again, clients really move to the cloud and addressing the security, compliance, and controls requirements that they need to deal with. And I would say just lastly, and probably the most important role is I am our Women in Cyber leader. So really instilling that program and making sure that we are having a mentorship program for our women consultants and making sure that we're pulling women through and that we're looking at what their goals are, making sure that we keep moving them to leadership positions. So glad to be here today, Doug.
Fantastic, Jaime. Thanks. JT?
Great to be here. Thank you guys so much for having me. JT Keating. I run marketing and product strategy for mobile security company Zimperium. We're on protecting about 1 billion devices worldwide. I've been in cybersecurity, particularly endpoint security, for 25 years. And so I basically run the marketing and strategy side of the organization, including analyst relations and the like. And most noteworthy for this conversation, the threat research, threat marketing side of things. So I'll be bringing some of that to bear as well. So thanks for having me, Doug.
Absolutely. Johnnie, thanks again for joining us.
Of course. And my thanks right back to my colleagues here at Deloitte and Zimperium, our partners. I have the privilege of running cloud security field engineering here at Oracle. It is an incredible group of people that help the customers of our public cloud do everything from ideation, envisioning, all the way to implementation. We help our customers architect secure and run secure. I myself have been in security since the late 90s, so I guess 24 plus years now. And it has been just an incredible career, but the learning never stops. And hopefully we'll all do some learning here together today.
Fantastic. Well, let's jump in. So I always find that, starting the discussion with a little context can be helpful. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on how has the landscape for cloud and mobile security changed in the last number of years? And maybe in particular, what do you see as a greater emphasis around cybersecurity among customers and partners now compared to years past?
So, Doug, I would say that, today the most common attacks and the trend that we continue to see is the rise in ransomware. Predominantly we have seen a lot of it from a financial gain perspective, but I think we're seeing a significant transition from data theft for financial gains to more true disruption. I'd say this is especially when you look at organizations that are in, operate a lot of more operational tech and OT. So locking down those systems, that infrastructure, so that you truly cannot operate your industrial control systems, that is incredibly more disruptive, and quite frankly, it's more impactful to the adversary. And I would say, the reality is that organizations are still getting breached. It's just across a wider set now of digital assets. And then lastly, I would say from a cybersecurity maturity perspective, we are seeing it move from, really more alert-based to more of a deep analysis in order to detect unique threats out there today.
That's great. JT, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree with everything Jamie is talking about right there. To me, it's interesting because we've all been doing, cybersecurity for years and years, and it's a Rubik's cube, right? I mean, if you get the blue side right, then the orange side gets kind of jacked up, and you're just constantly moving it around. So you got the threats on the one side, which we're going to be talking about. You've got the different architectural approaches. I mean, obviously, right now, one of the big buzzwords is zero trust. For instance, and so what's happening is not only is the threat side coming in one direction, but the how do we protect ourselves and what needs to be protected is coming in differently. On the mobile side of things, the simplest thing I would say that's changing is the definition of an endpoint. An endpoint has historically been a traditional Windows or Linux, operating system, but now it's iOS, Android, Chromebooks, IoT, as Jamie was starting to talk about. So I think it makes these things extremely much more complex, much more fluid. And then to Jamie's point, you can't just deal with alerts. If you're just dealing with alerts, then we've all seen that craters under its weight. And it craters under its weight when we're dealing with traditional endpoints. When you start talking about potentially billions of IoT or industrial IoT, endpoints, you have to take a totally different approach. So those are just some of the things that I've been seeing are some changes.
And ideally, you'd rather get ahead of an alert, right? Because an alert means that something's happened. I'll add to that kind of the journey to cloud perspective. When I first started my career in security, everybody was, every enterprise, every person was trying to do it themselves, right? Build security in your own network, in your data center, your own, pile on the tooling, figure it out. If you were lucky, you would go collaborate with some colleagues. It is a totally different mindset now. There is no customer to whom I speak that doesn't have a public cloud strategy for security, believe it or not, and even a multi-cloud public cloud strategy for security. And the why is, it should be self-evident, right? You have customers now understanding that they can avail themselves, be the beneficiaries of all the resourcing that public cloud providers have to put into, a secure, homogeneous design, lots of built-in tools, resources for research, resources for 24/7 monitoring. And I guess most importantly, if you think about it, as public cloud providers, we're in it with our customers, we're in it together. And so that, I think, is the good news side of the security picture, because I know we certainly have to reconcile a lot of bad news out there.
Yeah, so what do you see as maybe some of the top implications for businesses who aren't sufficiently prioritizing cybersecurity?
I mean, it's unfortunate that you still see this today in organizations. If you're truly not prioritizing cybersecurity, if the chief trust officers, the CISOs do not really have a fundamental seat at the table, your organization is going to experience financial loss. Your organization is going to experience disruption. And when you look at those two components together, you're going to have an impact to your brand and reputation. And I would say probably the most important thing when you sum all of those together is you're going to see an impact to trust. Trust is just paramount right now. Trust with your customers, trust with your employees. And if you impact that, if you truly lose a component of that, then what business are you in, essentially? It's very hard to kind of crawl back from that once it's been impacted.
And Jamie, from your perspective, though, why would folks not have this top of mind? Is it resourcing and education, or is it they've run the risk numbers and the actuarial say, hey, you can tolerate this much risk? What's behind it?
There's always going to be a risk appetite, right? Every organization is going to have a different level of risk. But, I think, John, you nailed it in terms of talent is the number one issue right now when it comes to cybersecurity. I hear it every day, all day from my clients. You cannot hire and cannot find the quality of cybersecurity resources that you need. And so a lot of organizations are sort of, looking at different like hybrid type of solutions to supplement. Either it's supplementing, threat hunting, or it's supplementing, DNR, or it's truly outsourcing the complete component because they just don't have the people. And that's just the reality of where we're at right now.
And if you layer on the fact that you're looking for talent that knows modern security, modern techniques, cloud, public cloud, securing cloud native development. And then you add IT, you add mobility to the whole mix, and those particular kinds of expertise start to become sort of very, very difficult to fill. I think that's probably where automation and adding some more predictive capabilities to our defense stack is imperative. No.
Yeah, and I would say that God bless our threat hunters, right? Because they are truly, the backbone of all of this, right? And the best cyber threat hunter is the one that is most curious, right? So there is an element of subjectivity when it comes to threat hunting, and you want that most curious person in the room that says, this looks interesting. Let me pull on this thread and see where it goes. Finding talent like that is difficult. And so there's such an appreciation for threat hunters today.
Yeah. So, I agree with you ladies 100%. Make a comment on the threat talent part, and then come back to another observation on the prioritization and why people do and don't. On the threat part, we've found, for instance, on the mobile side of things, the threat hunters were usually pretty good across all the traditional platforms. We came over to the mobile side. Our threat researchers, we got a group called Z Labs. They're incredible. But what's amazing is they are specialized down to both platforms. Like, this guy will be an iOS expert, this guy will be an Android expert. But even within that, this guy's an expert in phishing and this guy's an expert in malware. So it's when you start then putting those permutations together and say, how are we going to do threat hunting across that stuff? It goes back, Johnny, to what you're talking about as well with this. Everybody comes together much more now than they ever did. It used to be, how many different ISACs are out there now? The information sharing groups. Used to be there was only the FS ISAC. Now you've got healthcare and automotive, and everybody's sharing because they have to. You can't keep up with it all, right? Back on the question about prioritization, I agree with you guys in terms of the actuarial tables. Obviously, we all know that the only hacker you're going to face is an auditor. So if you have to deal with compliance, okay, you're going to invest. But when it comes to the other side, I think still, unfortunately, politics and organizational structure is really a significant part of why cybersecurity quite often isn't invested in.
Yeah, it's true. On the sort of like cloud infrastructure side of it, we see a lot. Company wishes to transform, be agile, rolling new custom applications in the public cloud, do it as fast as possible. Security team over here has, policies to be adhered to and what constitutes, baseline requirements for a secure landing zone. The two haven't spoken. And usually we end up being the glue bringing all of them together, because at least my team will help guide them all in the implementation of the security. I did want to sort of go back to the threat hunting for just a minute, though, and the collaboration, and say, we're not just talking about classical threat hunting anymore. We're talking about tiers of expertise. You mentioned some of it. There are folks out there that are expert in particular kinds of threat groups, or APTs. Mm-hmm. So, and going back to the point of, public cloud providers having the kind of resourcing to invest in this research, this is what our customers are looking to take advantage of. So you look at some of the research, for example, with, if you remember Meltdown Spectre and its variants, L1TF, which are hardware-based vulnerabilities and so forth, when you look at who discovered those and you scroll to the bottom, you'll see, Azure, GCP, Oracle researchers, name check. But again, these folks are, hard to find, for sure, to be sure. But they are collaborating with respect to one another, at least relative to the public cloud realm, where we have to, because again, we're in it together.
Mhm.
Yep.
Enjoying this episode? Find other Trending Topics episodes at oracle.com/trending topics. What do you see as, maybe a few of the latest trends, being the roles that you play in the industry? What are some of the latest trends in this space?
I'll start. I mean, like one of the most common conversations that I have with CIOs and CISOs is how do we modernize security? Now, it used to be the conversation was, well, I'm on-prem. I have somewhere between a dozen and 40 security tools. What can I divest myself of and go with sort of what's built into the public cloud? The conversation still happens, but it's not as common. The more common conversation now is, how do I optimize what is built in, and how do I link it up with estates that I have in other public clouds, as well as on premises, to create sort of a wide hybrid footprint, because I want a really efficient security architecture that can give me singular views for compliance, singular views for enforcement, singular views for monitoring. So that is definitely a trend. And in fact, Oracle is one of the key members of ONA, where we're having that conversation with our fellow public cloud providers about how to create a common security notification framework.
I mean, resilience has just really, surfaced to the very top. I think the boards are really being active in terms of asking their CTOs and their CISOs, how are we really prepared for an attack? How are we truly going to remain, up and running to the amount that we need to be in order to survive? And I think some are going back and saying, okay, I probably need some help to identify truly what those critical business services are. Not every single organization knows exactly what are the top tier, the crown jewels that I have to make sure are up, and what are the number of hours that I have to make sure I'm recovered by. A lot of those gaps is what we're helping clients now to identify what their recovery capabilities look like, what are they missing, and then putting together the right program in place. That's been very, very relevant right now for obvious reasons. I would also say getting back to the tools, and I always smile at that because there are hundreds of security tools out there in the marketplace. There is no shortage. And oftentimes, right, organizations say, hey, let's just implement this tool and all of our problems are going to be solved. But there's truly no processes first in place to support it. And so I would also say and argue that a lot of organizations, yes, have these great tools, but they've implemented maybe half of them. I'll say half of the capability. It's not consistently applied across the organization. So they're scratching their heads saying, okay, where's the ROI that, Mr. Vendor, you sold me? I'm not seeing the benefit. And therefore, they're not really capitalizing on those cyber capabilities. So we're seeing a lot of that as well.
Yeah, Jamie, I agree with you 100%. And we're, one of the, if you think about the standard triangle, right, where it's like you got the products or the platforms, then you got the people and you got the process. And we already talked about the problem with there aren't enough people. And guess what happens when you don't have enough people? It's also, you don't have enough people to implement product or enough people to implement process. And so you kind of get into this kind of troublesome loop. And zero trust is an example of one of the main trends that are occurring. And at its core, it gets back to, and both Johnnie and Jamie mentioned it, if you're waiting for an alert, you're probably too late. So recognizing the fact that we should just go look, I'm going to assess your identity and determine, and the device's identity, and I'm going to assess the risk of the environment you're in. And on the fly, I'm going to make a decision what resources I'm going to give you access to. That automating of the process, it's not perfect, but it's accounting for the reality of the fact, even pre-pandemic, that most of the computing resources and the things were outside of the protected corporate firewall DMZs that we had for so long, that you have to account for it. So doing these decisions on the fly, as opposed to locking them in and then seeing, oh, something happened. We find the alert out months later, kind of go all the way back. Trying to streamline and shorten that with some automation is definitely a major trend as well.
Yeah, for sure. And with regard to all of this tooling, yeah, I mean, Jamie said hundreds. Come on, it's more like thousands. Which is one of the reasons I think public cloud is doing a great service to companies and organizations trying to unify their security views. Cloud security posture management is one of those areas that into which things like threat detection are folded in, vulnerability scanning are folded in, configuration management, configuration drift control are folded in. It certainly is in our case. Every major cloud provider has it. And as I mentioned, a lot of us are coming together to sort of create connective tissue between these things. So what that means for users of the public cloud is finally, you're never going to get to the sort of the single management console screen, but unified risk views that are prescriptive in how you can go dial down risk versus sort of combing through tons and tons of alerts and detail as a knowledgeable someone to figure out where to reduce your risk, right? That world is going away. More prescriptive, more automated things rolling up into, centralized posture management. At least with cloud, we're able to do that. That is something that is good news.
Jamie, you mentioned that resiliency was something that your clients and customers are asking about. I'll be interested. What are some of the other questions that customers are asking about?
I think our clients are, want to be top of mind when it comes to new regulations that they're trying to meet out there. I know, doing business in China and the China cybersecurity law is one of the ones that constantly comes up. India is looking for their new data protection bill to get signed. That's going to have, another set of requirements that a lot of our clients are going to need to look at. And then, also there's a lot in terms of, organizations doing work with the federal government. So getting up to speed and getting their CMMC compliance certification is also one of the things that a lot of our clients are really working on. And I think there's also, potentially other countries, close to us that are going to start adopting, CMMC as well. So getting our clients prepared, doing readiness assessments for them are one of the key things that they've been asking a lot lately.
Jamie, have they how important has the privacy thing been? GDPR, CCPA,
Yeah.
That's one of the things that even when we talk about, the risks of some of these attacks, privacy just continues to raise its importance. And even again, on the BYOD side of things, when people are, whether it's a laptop or whether it's a tablet, it's like it's mine. So you need to protect my privacy. But have GDPR and CCPA and that sort of thing been relevant to your clients?
Definitely. And I would say, again, because I see a ton of it from an M&A space, when our clients are looking to help us do their cyber due diligence on the target, honing in on the data security, the data protection, understanding, does the target have a data classification policy? Do they really understand the importance of, data loss prevention and how that is so important to the organization? And I would also say when it comes to, quote unquote, being a target, right? Once the deal is announced, I mean, imagine, these hacker groups out there that get wind of this, and then those two entities, those two companies become a target. And then I would also say what's really important is your insider threat program. That can really stem some elements within your insider threat issues that can occur where you may have a disgruntled employee do something. And so the need of DLP becomes critical to understand, am I going to be able to identify and detect if there is, data exfiltration out of my environment because of the environment that you're in, because you're going through a transaction. So those are a lot of things that I help my clients kind of, walk through those scenarios with them and try to reduce the risk there as much as possible.
Now, for the folks listening to us too, I'm just going to contextualize it or sum it up, but Statistics show that the time of merger and acquisition, or shortly after the announcement of a merger and acquisition, is when threats against the participating companies tend to be the most elevated, and a lot of successful breaches have been associated with that. So, and Jaime clearly knows those statistics very well and has had to live them with clients probably. And data loss prevention is definitely sort of core tech to ensuring that security intense, high value information isn't leaving through applications or unwarranted access. But also what we see regarding data privacy and data protection is a lot of our clients, at least on the IS side, is potential or would be or current tenants of the cloud, geofencing their data. Where is my data? Can my data leave a region? Can my data inadvertently go, motion to another region without my say so? Those are very common questions we get, and of course, in our case, data stays at the region that the tenant has selected. But these are valid questions. Where is my data going when it's being accessed by an application? Where is it being processed? All of these things are relevant to GDPR. Other privacy regs, and just privacy in general. But at least the homogeneity of a public cloud platform allows the kind of visibility into where your data is that you don't necessarily have on premises. So I think, Jaime, you mentioned that you're doing assessments. I'd imagine that part of it is helping clients understand even where they have data, right? That is important and needs to be protected, or its access needs to be governed, monitored.
Well, this is awesome. So what are, maybe if we were to come up between us, like what are some of the tips, maybe 3 tips that we would give to companies, and how they should measure the effectiveness of their policies and how they should think about benchmarking against others in the industry?
I mean, measuring effectiveness, immediately when I hear that, I think, the only way to measure is to test. So looking at, a cybersecurity assessment across your 12 cyber domain areas and understanding, the security components I have in place, the controls I have in place. If you're not out there truly testing them, then you're not going to be able to determine your operating effectiveness. And I would say when it comes to benchmarking and looking at other organizations within your industry, performing a cyber maturity assessment will give you that maturity score, depending on what type of platform, framework, and tool that you're using. You'll be able to understand your score as it compares to other organizations in your industry. And it's a really good means to look at in terms of understanding all of my different cyber domain areas. Where am I falling short compared to others in my industry? Where actually am I ahead of other folks in our industry? And it really gives you that sense of, where do I hone in on to move that needle, to the right, to be more mature. So those are 2 things that I think are no brainers in terms of you're never going to know how to measure effectiveness unless you truly go out there and test it. A lot of clients have their business continuity plan, their crisis management plan, but you have to ask, okay, when is the last time you actually tested it? A lot of clients are doing war gaming to test, what really happens and are we well coordinated in that crisis mode? And again, you have to test in order to prove it.
What's nice about a maturity assessment program like the one that Jaime's talking about, that Deloitte does, it doesn't just focus on tech. It's also looking at whether your processes are mature. And so you see a holistic opportunity to transform and move up that maturity curve. It's not just, you're missing these 5 tools. It's very much a 360 view.
I think one of the things that we've seen, so we actually have a maturity model for mobile security that includes a mobile security index. So Jaime was talking about it holistically within each one of the kind of stacks. I think another part is saying, okay, well, how do you compare against your peers, and how do you compare against benchmarks, by vertical, by geography, by size, et cetera. And I think it's very helpful to do that. But what is required to do that is, first, you're going to have to be willing to anonymously have your data benchmarked as well. I mean, this is, again, I think, being part of the environment, right? And I think the other part is just having a broad enough base where you're saying, okay, if I'm only comparing against two, it doesn't matter. You need to compare against enough that to make it statistically valid along the lines of what Jamie is talking about. The other thing, though, that we've seen is not all metrics are created equally. I think based on your company's strategy, policy, risk posture, all of that, what metrics matter most need to be accounted for most. And having somebody like Deloitte that knows which levers matter more than less has got to be really important in that, because you don't know until you've gone through it, right?
Sure. Well, I'll round this out with, I'll be a little bit more prescriptive, I think, and forgive me, maybe even tactical, but for those listening that have responsibility for securing their tenancies in the public cloud, you probably know that all of us CSPs publish our best practices called benchmarks with the Center for Internet Security, or CIS. So you go there, you can download them. In our case, what we've done with Oracle Cloud is we've actually automated the process of implementing those benchmarks or best security best practices, and even provide scripting for checking compliance over time to make sure that those settings haven't drifted. So that's just something, like a go do, or maybe you have folks that you can sort of, task to go action on that. But, more broadly to Jamie's earlier point, there is probably capability that you could be taking advantage of right now, since public cloud providers are constantly on a continuous release cycle, right? CI/CD. So you probably don't know all of the ways in which you could be shoring up your defenses and hardening your tenancy and improving your data resilience. And
whether you do it either by connecting with us or folks on my team, or really organizations like Deloitte that can help you kind of understand.
That range is, that would be, I guess, my go-to.
Tell us what you think. Rate the episode at oracle.com/trending topics. So these are certainly fascinating and challenging times that we're experiencing, whether a lingering global health crisis, growing geopolitical instability. They're certainly among the variables impacting our current environment. How are these impacting customers and clients? Do you see them moving forward in a more expedited way, or slowing down their efforts around cybersecurity?
I mean, it's definitely excelling, right? So when you think of the pandemic, right, the last 2 years, I think organizations' cyber capabilities have definitely been challenged. And why have they been challenged? Because they are trying to keep up with the pace of digital transformation. They're trying to keep up with the pace of cloud adoption, the increase of third parties. All of these things combined have been, I think, a strain on the cyber organization. All of these things create cyber risk. And so I think a lot of organizations have just been challenged trying to keep up with it all. I think, like, an example of that is, when the pandemic hit, everyone was remote, and there was just such a significant push, that we've seen in terms of, shifting, as an example, your ERP into the cloud. A lot of organizations did that so quickly out of necessity. And I would say that they've looked at the core things that mattered in terms of, let's make sure that we've got our application security nailed. And I'd say the organizations that navigated that well thought of all of the other different components that exist within cloud security outside of AppSec, right? Just securing your application doesn't mean, okay, I'm good, I've reduced my cyber risk. The clients and the organizations that I've seen deal with it on a more holistic manner, right? But again, they're looking at the data protection, they're looking at the data security, network security. When you look at the different, platforms in terms of infrastructure, IaaS and PaaS, they're looking at, securing all of that, and bringing in identity and access management, bringing in a PAM system. Again, because 80% of successful attacks are really through compromise identity systems. And so I've seen organizations leverage really well the fact that they are moving quickly to the cloud and adopting it for their ERP. They're looking at all of these other components to help reduce those cyber risks.
Yeah, just so folks don't become super scared, is it okay, Jamie? You probably mean credentials, right? Not the identity systems themselves are actually.
Right, leaf credentials.
Right. So, right, the vast majority of attacks happen because credentials get stolen, and so that attack vector is dealt with by having multi-factor everywhere, but continuous monitoring. I think JT was sort of alluding to that, right? Kind of monitoring your security posture throughout connectivity so that you can ratchet it down as you need on demand. But going back to sort of the original question, I wholeheartedly agree with Jamie. It's been an accelerant, whether it's the just one after another spate of ransomware attacks or the geopolitical situation coming on the heels of that. All of these things have catalyzed greater awareness, sense of urgency. We've seen some mandates come out in the form of the presidential EO or executive order saying, cloud first, revisit your strategies for incident response. And the one nice thing outcropping has been also what I would say this very honest and transparent conversation that we're having now with customers about how we can help them. The idea is, okay, we need to revisit our data resilience and recovery agility strategy. How can you help? Give us a point of view. And here's what's top of mind for us, and here's where what locations we want to operate in. But these kinds of transparent conversations, coming together as partners to essentially create a security strategy for the long term and for dealing with the trends that we're seeing at hand. That has been a really nice thing to see.
Yeah, and I would echo completely what the ladies are saying here. It needs to go past buzzwords. You need to actually be partnering with your vendors. And it gets back, I think, Jamie, even to the whole conversation at the very beginning about there just isn't enough talent. There isn't enough talent. And so you need to get talent wherever you can get it, including people that specialize. But overall, what everyone's talking about, it has been an accelerant. And it's been an accelerant in a lot of different ways. Because when the pandemic hit, everybody had to work from home on whatever devices they had. So there was initiatives beforehand about remote working. There was initiatives, digital transformation initiatives around BYOD, et cetera. Again, mobile and traditional, not just mobile. It happened like that. It also, and I'd be really interested in Johnnie and Jamie's thoughts on this. It has accelerated the adoption of products and processes and approaches that are required for the modern age. It also accelerated the demise of some technologies that maybe don't fit anymore. You need different technology when all of the information is sitting in one centralized spot, and you need to go to that. You need a very different technology if it's all up in the cloud. And so there have been some approaches that are past their prime, and but that's good because it's cleaning it up and it's moving it up to that modern environment that we've been talking about.
Are there particular areas in legacy technologies that you see that are the biggest at risk and that ought to be accelerated in terms of and modernized?
Yeah, I mean, it's not at risk. It's a rethink to meet modern development trends like microservices, right? Containers. So when you have ephemeral processes that are getting spun up and spun down, then the notion of having something that's a gate is changed, right? And it's more if there is a gate, it is also ephemeral. It's spun up and spun down so that access control is done in the moment, and rather than this persistent guardian, this persistent barricade essentially. So those kinds of technologies are effectively being built into, modern applications.
When the pandemic hit, everyone's like, what do we do? Everyone's working from home. We need to be secure. Throw VPNs at everything. And it was the classic point-to-point VPN that was going from remote to headquarters. And then they realized we just put a bottleneck in because none of our apps are at headquarters anymore. And that accelerated the zero trust, kind of orientation where it's like, okay, maybe I don't want to need to backhaul all the way to here. And also, I still want to encrypt my traffic. So I need to approach the problem differently. But then after a while, everyone settled down a little bit and they said, okay, now how do we actually move forward in a positive way? And Jamie, I'd imagine a lot of your clients went through those kind of curves when it first happened.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think it was also an opportunity, as you said, like to dust off tools or maybe start looking at tools that they've only half implemented is to accelerate those roadmaps as well. Again, it's surprising that you still see clients that don't have a privileged access management system in place. I've seen clients that implement MFA in some parts of the organization, but not consistently across the other. And so they're not benefiting themselves by doing that. And so I do think you saw a surge of, okay, now we're kind of forced to look at this out of pure necessity so that we can survive these next 2 years while we're, working remotely and trying to do it in a secure fashion.
Yeah, ubiquity of the application of any security technology is key, right? Because security is only as strong as the weakest link in the chain. So obviously, if you're not implementing something broadly, there you go.
Right.
What we saw, and part of the reason why I say I have the best job in the world is because I get to help customers with security day in and day out. My entire team does. As we were able to go to this over the shoulder model via Zoom and conferencing and actually help customers in the implementation of security, networking, identity best practices and tuning. It was awesome.
That's a great example, Johnny. It's from a cloud services perspective, or a technology provider. What are some of the things that the industry can be doing better to help support customers and clients?
Yeah, look, well, for one thing, build tools that have the expertise built in. Enough already with sort of like, let me give you this bag of tools, isn't it terrific? And you, as a customer, have to go figure out, well, do I have people that even know how to use this stuff? What is this stuff? Just build in not just the tool, but the expertise. So an example would be, with our Cloud Guard, we include a bunch of detector recipes out of the box so that you're not going and figuring out, well, should I be monitoring for buckets that are private that go public? It's a built-in detector, right? In fact, some of the automated responses that you can have are also given as templates, and you either turn it on or turn it off. So that's one example. The other is get prescriptive, right? Which means that you as a tenant come in and everything's pretty much locked out, and you have to decide what you're going to open up rather than the other way around. Mm-hmm. But that's another example of starting with, yes, the more conservative posture, but certainly one that is that has dialed down the vast majority of the risk, and then you sort of decide what it is that you want to take up from there.
People will go, whoa, no, we don't want to do that. Well, sorry. The right tool for the right job. Don't try to be everything. No company can be everything. Both Jamie and Johnny have talked about it. Know what you're good at, excel what you're good at. And then I completely agree with Johnny. If you look at like within our console, for instance, we know mobile security better than anybody else. It's because that's what we do. We eat, sleep, and breathe it. And we have hundreds and hundreds of enterprise customers. So we have the advantage of having implemented that and having tuned it and having refined it. So make sure that is provided right up front to people who don't have that expertise. Know what you're good at and partner with the people that are good at the rest of it, and things will actually work much better together, is my opinion. But Jamie, what recommendation would you give folks like us?
Well, I think you guys both said, and Johnny, I think you said it well, right? It's security by design has to be implemented. It has to be baked into these products. It's not an afterthought. It's not, let's bolt on this other piece to make it secure. Out of the gate, it's security by design. And I would say also, I mean, majority of the attacks on cloud have been because of misconfigurations, right? And so, Johnny, again, to your point, you have everything hardened, and then you start loosening up where, if, how you need to. It's not about, let's do it the opposite way. Everything is open, then you slowly secure it. That just simply doesn't work. And I think the more that we can do automation in terms of detecting misconfigurations and real-time remediation, and again, wrapping the security by design, methodology around this is what is truly needed to help thwart more of these attacks going forward in cloud.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Would you like to see bonus content from this discussion? Check out the episode blog here at oracle.com/trending topics. You see, what's the most interesting innovation you see in the industry today? But any examples of that?
I was going to say there's so many. Where do you start? I mean, everything from security being built into hardware so that systems are booting up secure and let's say impervious to somebody getting in the middle of that process. These cloud-centric technologies that, I mean, some of what I was describing earlier that effectively can monitor a cloud native application and understand connectivity patterns that the application is making to other applications or other pieces of that application, and understand whether that's a normal or an anomalous connectivity path. I mean, so, we think of that as securing containers, securing microservices. Those are, fascinating areas. And then, of course, the whole realm of cloud workload protection, right? The idea that you're not looking at like, I'm going to protect a single virtual machine. I'm going to look at an application with its logic tier, with its database backend, and treat that whole thing as a workload and secure it, with a policy and a desire for only not even the right kinds of users to be accessing it, but the right kinds of access patterns, period, whether that's between entities or that's between, human beings.
I was just gonna, the one thing that, I've seen, in terms of when it comes to detect and response, when it comes to, the most sophisticated clients that I've seen and the ones that have really, exceptional, call it world-class security, when it comes to the threat hunting and all of the, the external sources that you get data from, the forums, all of your searching capability on the dark web, all of the telemetry that you're bringing in, right? They're leveraging data lakes for this, right? And they are plugging in, your SIM technology to really do hardcore analytics with AI to come up with, these are now the playbooks we're going to live by. And the constant adjustments that you have to do to those playbooks. And, the threat hunters have been the ones, behind majority of this. And when they're seeing new things and when they're seeing new attacks and they're getting all of that data and they're plugging it in and they're leveraging the SIM to drive those hardcore analytics using AI. Those are the ones that, when something comes, they spot it a lot quicker than someone that doesn't use those type of procedures in place. So it always kind of, blows my mind when I go into organizations and I see that, and it's like, it's just well done.
The one that I think is really intriguing, but again, there is no silver bullets, is the whole XDR motion. The whole concept of, I want to be able to take data from all my different endpoints and my network and pull it together and look for threats that are hitting across the board, and also look to be able to, as a part of that automated response, go solve the problem. Simple example. Let's say that I'm I go in and my mobile device detects I'm on a bad Wi-Fi network. It's a fake Wi-Fi network that's been set up, right? But would it also be really cool to say, okay, hold up, this mobile device is now on the network, is my laptop, which doesn't have any detection capability of bad Wi-Fi networks. Or if there's a phishing text that I get what happens to the credentials and how does that flow through all the system? This like you were talking about, Jamie, that the ability for all this stuff to be in one place and to be able to deal with that and look for the things that matter and respond to it quickly enough to say, okay, you know what? Your laptop is sitting on the same Wi-Fi network. You're not getting access to the financial systems until you're off of that Wi-Fi network. That sort of cross connection, I think, has got some really interesting potential going forward.
This has been a fascinating conversation. I think maybe to wrap it up, I'd be curious for each one of you to share, like, what's the one takeaway that you want our listeners to hear? The one thing that you want to be thinking about in prioritizing?
You're not going to thwart every attack. That's just a given. So resilience is key. And let's just a very simple concept. Don't forget about just nailing the basics. Nailing the basics, patching. Nailing the basics, identity and access management, and PAM and MFA. I mean, these are things that I think all of us have been in here for so long are just the no-brainers. But again, you'd be surprised how you still don't see it out there in organizations. And so that would be just, I know it's more than one, Doug, sorry, but those are kind of the core things. And you got to nail the basics of security.
That's great. Thanks, Jamie. JT, your thoughts?
I am going to go back to, again, even though it's kind of trite, the right tool, right job, right person, right, problem. There are too many things happening to be experts in everything. And so working and leveraging across the industry and working and leveraging across your partners, I think is critical, so that you can actually, for those parts of the risk profile that you're trying to address, you can address it most effectively, because nobody can keep up with all this. You just can't. And so it really comes down to how well can we information share and partner together, and people stick to what you're good at and let the other folks stick to what they're good at.
Excellent. Johnnie.
I'll double down on that and say no public cloud provider can furnish everything that you need on security, period. End of story. Even one as phenomenal as my employer. This is why we partner. This is why Deloitte and Zimperium are here. We don't aim to make all of it. I mean, a defense in depth stack is going to span layers and layers. And the idea is to partner with the best so that we deliver holistic strategies. And if public cloud is not part of your security, your data resilience strategy, it should be. And we all, I think, welcome that conversation with you and hope to have it.
Awesome. Thank you, all three of you. This has been a really fantastic conversation. I hope our listeners enjoyed it as well. But thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, y'all. Appreciate it. It's been a pleasure as always.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to check out other released and future episodes at oracle.com/trending topics. Also, subscribe to the Partner Perspectives podcast at oracle.com/podcasts. This series features trending topic episodes and other great partner discussions on their customer stories and related best practices.